Bedfordshire appears quiet and unassuming, shaped by villages and country roads. Beneath that calm, older stories linger. These are 10 haunted places where the past refuses to fade. Milton Ernest Hall. Along the Bedford Road, where traffic passes without hesitation, Milton Ernest Hall stands quietly behind its gates, its long history easily overlooked. The house and its surrounding grounds have witnessed centuries of change, yet one story continues to surface unchanged by time or explanation. The most enduring legend attached to Milton Ernest Hall concerns a headless coachman. According to local tradition, this figure is seen driving a horse-drawn carriage through the gates of the estate before continuing along the road itself. The sight is said to be brief, often lasting only seconds, but described with remarkable consistency. Witnesses speak of the sound arriving first, the steady rhythm of hooves on stone, the creak of wheels turning. Only then does the carriage appear moving with purpose, as though following a familiar route long since abandoned. The driver sits upright, dressed in traditional livery, yet where his head should be, there is only shadow. No attempt is made to interact. The coach does not slow, nor does it acknowledge onlookers. It simply passes through, continuing along the road until it fades from view, leaving silence behind it. There is no single historical record that clearly explains the origin of this tale. Some suggest it reflects a tragic accident involving a servant. Others believe it is an echo of the estate's former wealth and routine preserved in memory rather than fact. As with many such stories, certainty remains out of reach. More subtle experiences have also been reported. A sudden chill near the gates, the sensation of movement just beyond peripheral vision, an instinctive urge to pause while passing the entrance without knowing why. These moments are often dismissed, yet they continue to be mentioned quietly by those who know the story. Skeptics point to imagination, shaped by repetition or the mind responding to a familiar legend. Old roads, after all, invite old stories, yet the persistence of the coachman's route, always following the same path, has ensured the tale endures. Milton Ernest Hall remains private, its gates closed, its history carefully preserved. Still, when evening settles and the road grows quieter, some believe that the sound of hooves may return. And as we leave this first location behind, the image of a carriage traveling without a driver lingers, guiding us onward into Bedfordshire, where the past is said to move with a will of its own. Willington Dovecote. Rising from open fields near the River Great Ouse, the Willington Dovecote stands as one of Bedfordshire's most distinctive historic structures. Its stone walls and conical roof speak of agriculture, order, and prosperity. Yet beneath this calm exterior, the site carries a story bound closely to ambition, power, and uneasy return. In the early 16th century, this land was owned by Sir John Gostwycke, a wealthy courtier who rose rapidly under the rule of Henry VIII. His original manor once stood nearby, long since replaced by later buildings. But local legend insists that Sir John never truly left his estate. As a spectre, he is said to return repeatedly to the Dovecote, the surrounding stables, and the Georgian manor that later occupied the site of his former home. Witnesses describe a solitary figure moving deliberately across the grounds, dressed in the fashion of his age, his presence calm, but unmistakably purposeful. More curious still are reports of the apparition crossing the open field toward the church. Those who claim to have seen this describe a slow, measured walk, unaffected by weather or terrain. The figure does not acknowledge observers, nor does it deviate from its route, as though compelled to follow a ritual long established. The Dovecote itself is often described as feeling unusually heavy when empty. Visitors speak of a sudden stillness inside, where sound seems muted and time oddly stretched. Some report faint footsteps or the sensation of being watched while standing alone within its walls, though no figure is visible. Skeptical explanations suggest that the prominence of Sir John Gostwycke in local history has shaped these accounts, turning memory into apparition. The site, after all, is steeped in association, and expectation can color perception. Yet even those unfamiliar with the story have commented on an atmosphere that feels attentive rather than abandoned. There are no violent disturbances reported here, no slamming doors or sudden movement. Instead, the unease lies in repetition. The same route, the same locations, the same silent figure returning again and again. Willington Dovecote remains carefully preserved, a landmark of heritage, rather than fear. But as the light fades across the fields and the church stands quiet in the distance, one might find themselves watching the path between them, wondering who else still knows the way. And with that measured journey in mind, we move on toward a church where legend claims even darker forces once left their mark upon the stone itself. St. Mary's Church. Set slightly apart from the village green, St. Mary's Church presents a curious silhouette. Its tower stands detached from the main body of the church, a separation that has inspired explanation, speculation, and legend for generations. Stone records give practical reasons for this design. Local folklore offers something far less ordinary. According to a long-standing tale, a dark force once took hold of the tower itself. The story claims that the devil, angered by the devotion of the townspeople, attempted to seize the structure and tear it from the church. In response, the vicar is said to have prayed with such intensity that the grip was broken. The tower fell away, set apart from the rest of the building, and has remained so ever since. Whether taken as metaphor or myth, the legend has shaped how the church is experienced after dark. Visitors have reported seeing shadowy figures moving in and around the tower, often described as indistinct and dark against the stone. These shapes do not rush or retreat. They appear briefly, then fade, leaving behind a sense of watchfulness rather than threat. Sound plays a significant role here. The low, steady beat of drumming has been reported on occasion, echoing faintly through the churchyard when no source can be found. This sound is sometimes linked to stories associated with nearby buildings, as though the disturbances do not respect boundaries. Beyond the tower, the churchyard itself carries further tradition. A monk is said to walk among the graves, his presence marked by quiet movement rather than sight. Those who claim to have encountered him speak of a sudden chill and the feeling of being followed for several steps before the sensation lifts without explanation. Skeptics point out that churches gather stories as readily as they gather history. Wind, wildlife, and acoustics can easily create illusions of movement and sound. Yet even visitors unaware of the legends often remark on the unusual atmosphere, particularly near the tower, where space and silence feel oddly charged. St. Mary's continues to serve its community, its doors open, its purpose unchanged. The tower remains apart, a visible reminder of something unresolved. And as we leave the churchyard, behind the separation between stone and shadow, seems less architectural than symbolic, guiding us onward to gardens where voices are said to drift without bodies to claim them. The Swiss Garden. Tucked within the landscaped grounds of old Warden Park, the Swiss Garden appears carefully composed, almost theatrical in its design. Created in the 19th century, its winding paths, ornate bridges, and decorative structures were intended to delight and surprise. Yet when the gardens fall quiet, they are said to offer a different kind of experience altogether. Visitors have long spoken of voices heard among the trees and shrubs drifting softly through the air when no one else is nearby. These sounds are rarely clear enough to form words. Instead, they resemble low conversation, carried on the breeze, stopping abruptly when followed. Those who hear them often describe a sudden awareness of being out of place, as though the garden is no longer meant for company. The most frequently mentioned figure associated with the Swiss garden is known simply as the Grey Lady. She is described as a woman dressed in clothing typical of the mid-19th century, her gown muted in tone, her hair a striking shade of gold. Witnesses say she moves slowly along the paths, never straying from the routes laid out so carefully by human hands. Her presence is usually brief. A figure glimpsed near a bridge or between trees, a shape reflected momentarily in glass or water. When approached, she fades without drama, leaving behind only the impression that someone had been there moments before. Unlike many haunted sites, the Swiss garden does not carry stories of violence or tragedy tied to a single individual. This absence has led some to suggest that the experiences here are less about a specific spirit and more about atmosphere. A place designed to evoke emotion may over time begin to generate its own echoes. Others believe the Grey Lady represents a former resident or visitor, bound not by trauma but by attachment. The care invested in the garden, its deliberate beauty and order may have given rise to a presence that reflects admiration rather than unrest. Skeptics point to natural explanations. Sound travels unpredictably through foliage. Light and shadow shift constantly. Expectations shape perception. These are sensible conclusions, particularly in a place designed to play with perspective. Yet many who visit the Swiss garden alone, especially as daylight begins to fade, remark on a subtle change in mood. The paths feel longer. The silence feels intentional. The garden remains open, preserved as a place of enjoyment and reflection. But as evening settles and the last visitors depart, the sense persists that not every figure here belongs to the present. And as we leave the carefully arranged paths behind, we turn toward a site far older and far less ornamental, where unrest is said to linger in stone and shadow alike. Warden Abbey, set back from the road and surrounded by open countryside, the remains of Warden Abbey stand quietly near Old Warden, their foundations marking the site of a religious house that once dominated the landscape. Little of the abbey now rises above ground, yet the absence of stone has done nothing to diminish its reputation. Founded in the 12th century, Warden Abbey was home to monks whose lives were shaped by routine discipline and devotion. When the abbey was dissolved, its buildings were gradually dismantled, repurposed, or left to decay. What remained, according to local tradition, was not simply memory, but a presence that refused to be displaced. Those who have stayed in nearby buildings speak of sounds that seem to have no modern cause. A bell ringing faintly in the distance, despite no bell remaining on the site. The slow, deliberate noise of something being dragged across the ground, stopping suddenly as though the effort has been abandoned. Inside adjacent properties, more personal disturbances have been reported. Footsteps pacing on upper floors when no one is there. A coldness that settles abruptly in specific rooms, lingering long after the rest of the building has warmed. Shadows appear where light should reach, easily shifting without an obvious source. One particularly unsettling detail involves doors and latches. The latch on a front door has been heard banging repeatedly as if tested from the outside. On another occasion, something was said to have tried to open a first-floor bedroom door, the handle moving slowly before stopping, leaving the occupant unwilling to sleep for the remainder of the night. Objects have also been known to go missing, only to reappear later in places already searched. Electrical equipment has reportedly malfunctioned without explanation, switching on or off unexpectedly as though responding to unseen interference. Skeptics argue that such reports are common in rural properties built near ancient sites. Old wiring temperature changes, and the power of suggestion offer reasonable explanations. Yet those who experience these events often emphasize their persistence and pattern repeating in the same locations over many years. Warden Abbey itself remains largely silent, its ruins blending into the surrounding land. There are no warnings posted, no attempts to dramatize its past. But when the countryside grows still, and night settles in the sense of something unfinished seems to press closer. And as we leave this place of broken vows and quiet endurance behind, we move onward to a far more modern setting where corridors lit by necessity rather than reverence carry stories of their own. Bedford Hospital. Hospitals are places of constant movement, even in the quietest hours. Lives begin and end within their walls, and emotion lingers long after individual moments have passed. In the south wing of Bedford Hospital, one particular story has endured, spoken softly and only when necessary. Reports center on Russell Ward, where a young woman dressed in white has been seen moving silently through the corridors. She is often described as wearing either a dress or a coat, her appearance indistinct but unmistakably human. Those who claim to have seen her say she does not walk in the usual sense. Instead, she glides her feet, never quite touching the floor. Local tradition identifies her as a former member of staff, a woman in her early 20s who worked in pathology many years ago. According to the story, she took her own life while employed at the hospital. No official confirmation links her directly to the sightings, yet the association has persisted. One of the most repeated accounts describes the figure entering the ladies' toilets late at night. When staff followed to check, they found the room empty. The only sign of disturbance was a noticeable chill that lingered in the air, out of keeping with the rest of the ward. Other experiences have been reported throughout the building. Doors to wards have rattled, as if someone were attempting to enter. In another area, a slow, shuffling sound has been heard moving along the floor, stopping abruptly when investigated. More unsettling still are accounts involving patients. Side barriers on hospital beds have been found lowered without explanation. One person reported feeling someone climb into bed beside her, the mattress shifting under weight that should not have been there. When she turned, the space was empty. In a separate room, the bars of a cot were heard rattling repeatedly. Staff later noted that a former patient in that room had exhibited the same behavior while alive. Skeptical explanations are readily offered. Hospitals are complex environments. Sounds travel unpredictably. Fatigue and stress heighten perception. These factors are impossible to ignore. Yet those who experience these moments often emphasize how real they felt at the time, grounded in physical sensation rather than imagination. The South Wing continues its work without pause, focused on care and recovery. But during the late hours when corridors grow still and lights dim, some believe the hospital remembers those who never truly left. And as we move on from this place of healing and loss, we turn toward a house marked by a single night of tragedy, replayed endlessly in sound rather than sight. Kempston Manor. Set back from the road in a quiet residential area, Kempston Manor appears calm and unremarkable by day. Its grounds give little indication of the tragedy that local tradition insists still revisits the site, not as a vision, but as a moment endlessly replayed in sound. The story is fixed to a single winter evening in the 19th century. On Christmas Eve, a young boy was waiting at the manor for his parents to return from a formal ball. When he heard the approach of their carriage, excitement overcame caution. He ran out to greet them straight into the path of the horses. The carriage could not stop in time. The boy was trampled beneath the wheels and died before help could be given. According to local legend, the events of that night never fully released their hold on the place. Each year, close to the anniversary of the accident, the sounds are said to return. Witnesses describe the distant rhythm of hooves, the creak of a carriage in motion, and then, most disturbing of all, the sudden cry of a child, sharp and brief, cutting through the night air. These sounds are not heard every year, nor by everyone. They are most often reported late in the evening when the surroundings are quiet and expectation is low. Those who hear them frequently remark on how clear and directional the noises seem, as though a real carriage were passing just beyond view. No figure is ever seen. There is no ghostly child running across the grounds, no visible horses or vehicle. The absence of an apparition only adds to the unease. Sound without source, memory without form, leaves little room for reassurance. Skeptics suggest natural explanations. Distant traffic wind, moving through trees, the imagination shaped by repetition of the story itself. Seasonal association, particularly around Christmas, may heighten sensitivity to unusual sounds. These arguments are reasonable, and yet they do not account for the emotional impact described by those who experience it. Many report an overwhelming sense of sorrow rather than fear. The sound of the scream is said to linger in the mind long after it fades from the air, leaving listeners reluctant to speak for several moments afterward. Kempston Manor remains a private residence, its past largely unspoken. Life continues around it, unchanged by legend. But for those who know the story, Christmas Eve carries an added weight. And as we leave this place behind, carrying the echo of a single moment frozen in time, we move onward to a pathway where grief, devotion, and memory are said to walk side by side. Ladies' Walk. Running quietly through Kempston Ladies' Walk appears at first to be an ordinary pathway bordered by trees and softened by age. By daylight, it passes unnoticed. Yet after dusk, it becomes one of Bedfordshire's most emotionally charged locations, shaped by stories of loss and unresolved longing. The figure most closely associated with the walk is Lady Snag. According to local tradition, she is seen moving slowly along the path, calling softly for her lost son. Witnesses describe her voice as faint but unmistakably human, carried just far enough to be heard before fading into silence. Those who encounter her often speak not of fear but of sorrow, as though they have interrupted a private grief. Another female presence is said to appear nearby, dressed in mourning clothes. She is believed to be waiting for a cavalier lover who never returned. Her figure is described as still and composed, lingering briefly before fading without sound. When she vanishes, the air is said to feel suddenly heavier, as if something meaningful has just passed. There are also reports of two additional figures, twins named Sophia and Francis, who once co-owned a nearby manor. They are said to be seen together, walking side by side, their forms pale and indistinct. Unlike the solitary figures linked to loss, the twins are described as calm and companionable, as though bound more to each other than to tragedy. What makes Ladies' Walk unsettling is not dramatic disturbance, but subtle change. Footsteps seem closer than expected. The path feels longer than it should. Time appears to stretch, encouraging those walking alone to quicken their pace without knowing why. Skeptics suggest that isolation, shadow, and repetition have shaped these stories over time. Trees distort sound. Darkness alters distance. Memory fills the gaps. These explanations are reasonable, yet they do little to explain the shared emotional tone reported by those who experience the walk after dark. Ladies' Walk remains open and unmarked. People pass through daily unaware of the stories beneath their feet. But when evening settles and the path grows still, some believe it remembers those who once waited here, pacing quietly between hope and loss. The Hare and Hounds. Standing within the village of Old Warden, the Hare and Hounds presents the familiar appearance of a traditional English public house. Its low ceilings, timbered interior, and quiet corners suggest comfort rather than unease. Yet within this seemingly ordinary setting, a small number of persistent stories have earned the building a quiet reputation. The most frequently mentioned presence is that of a woman seen in an upstairs room. Those who report encountering her describe a solitary figure, standing or moving slowly, her features indistinct, and her expression unreadable. She does not speak, nor does she appear to notice those who see her. Moments later, she vanishes, leaving behind a sudden chill or a lingering sense of unease. Another account places a female figure within the bar area itself. The details are vague, and it is not known whether this sighting refers to the same presence seen upstairs or an entirely separate one. What connects these experiences is their subtlety. There is no dramatic entrance, no disturbance meant to draw attention. The figure simply appears as though going about her own business, before fading quietly from view. Staff and visitors alike have noted how these sightings often occur during quieter periods when the pub is nearly empty and sound carries easily. In such moments, the building seems to settle into itself, amplifying small changes in temperature or atmosphere. A corner that feels suddenly colder, a sensation of being watched from behind, gone as soon as it is acknowledged. Skeptical explanations are easy to offer. Old buildings shift and settle. Reflections from glass and polished surfaces can mislead the eye. Fatigue and expectation can shape perception, particularly late in the evening. These possibilities are not dismissed by those who share the stories. Yet what gives the Hare and Hounds its quiet distinction is the consistency of tone across accounts. No one describes fear or panic. Instead, they speak of brief confusion, followed by a lingering discomfort that remains long after the moment has passed. The pub does not encourage these tales. It continues to serve its community without comment, its history kept largely to itself. But for those who experience something out of place, the memory lingers. And as we leave the Hare and Hounds behind, there is one final stop ahead. A place where activity becomes unmistakably physical and where unseen hands are said to reach out from the past, bringing our journey through Bedfordshire to its most unsettling close. The Knife and Cleaver, standing at the heart of Houghton conquest. The Knife and Cleaver is a traditional English public house with a long and layered past. Its low beams, worn floors, and quiet corners suggest familiarity rather than fear. Yet among staff and regulars, the building is known for activity that feels distinctly personal and at times uncomfortably close. One of the most frequently repeated accounts involves the booking diary kept behind the bar. On more than one occasion, its pages have been seen rifling through by themselves as though turned by an unseen hand. Witnesses describe watching in disbelief as the paper moved, stopping only when directly addressed, leaving the room abruptly silent. In one particularly unsettling incident, a member of staff reported feeling a hand placed firmly on their shoulder while standing alone. When they turned, no one was there. The sensation was described as unmistakably physical, not a brush of air or momentary imbalance, but deliberate contact. In the same area, a strange figure has also been glimpsed, though details remain indistinct, as if the shape refuses to resolve fully. Regular patrons have shared their own experiences. One reported having his jacket tugged sharply from behind while seated enough to cause him to turn around in alarm. Others have spoken of objects being tipped over without warning, glasses shifting on tables, small items moving just out of reach. These events are brief, but leave behind a lingering sense of intrusion. Another commonly mentioned feature is what witnesses describe as a strange draft. Unlike ordinary cold spots, this movement of air feels directed, as though passing through the room with intent. It is often noticed in otherwise still conditions, without any door or window open to explain it. Skeptics offer familiar explanations. Old buildings settle. Air currents change unexpectedly. Expectation shapes interpretation, particularly in places with strong character and history. These explanations are reasonable, and the pub itself does not promote its reputation. Yet what distinguishes the Knife and Cleaver is the consistency of experiences across decades and different witnesses. The activity does not escalate, nor does it resolve. It simply repeats quietly, persistently, as though the building itself is reaching out in small, unmistakable ways. The Knife and Cleaver continues to welcome locals and visitors alike, its warmth and hospitality unchanged. But when conversation fades and the last glasses are cleared, some believe the pub does not empty entirely. And with that final unseen touch lingering in the mind, our journey through Bedfordshire reaches its end, leaving us with the uneasy sense that some places remember us long after we have gone. As our journey through Bedfordshire comes to an end, these places remain exactly where they are woven into everyday life. Whether you see them as legend or lingering memory, they remind us how deeply the past settles into place. If these stories stayed with you, share your thoughts below and join Creepy Experience as we continue exploring where history refuses to rest.